My name is Sophie. I am 32 years old, and I spent my childhood raising my 3 younger siblings while my mother lived her best life. After Dad died when I was 9, Mum decided parenting was optional. Now she's shocked I finally cut her off after decades of emotional blackmail. The irony is that she genuinely doesn't remember abandoning us. But I remember everything. Every missed birthday, every empty fridge, every night alone. If you've ever had to grow up too fast, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe if my story resonates with you. I once had a normal childhood. For my first 9 years, I lived in a modest but comfortable house in suburban Minnesota with 2 loving parents and 3 younger siblings. My father was a high school history teacher who spent evenings helping me with homework at the kitchen table. My mother worked part-time as a nurse at the local hospital. They seemed happy together, laughing at inside jokes and dancing in the kitchen while making Sunday breakfast. My brother Aaron came along when I was 2, and we were typical siblings fighting one minute and building blanket forts the next. When I was 6, my twin sisters Lisa and Laura were born. I still remember my father gently placing one tiny bundle in my arms, his eyes crinkling with pride as he said, "Sophie, you are going to be such an amazing big sister." Dad was my hero. He had this way of making learning fun, turning our backyard into archaeological digs or our living room into historical reenactments. Every night he read to us before bed, doing all the character voices that made us giggle. Mum was different, more practical. She made sure we had clean clothes and doctor appointments, but it was always Dad who showed up for school, plays and science fairs. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was stable, predictable, safe. We took modest vacations to lake cabins in the summer. We had traditions like Friday pizza night and Sunday afternoon bike rides. I never once worried about who would take care of us or whether there would be food in the refrigerator. Everything changed the spring I turned 9. Dad started getting headaches that wouldn't go away. Then came the fatigue, the weight loss, the dizzy spells. Mum took him to the doctor and they came home with hollow expressions. Cancer, aggressive, in his brain. The next 6 months were a blur of hospital visits and whispered adult conversations. Dad tried to keep things normal, still helping with homework, when he could still telling jokes even as his face grew gaunt. I remember the confusion of that time, how adults would pat my head and say, "You need to be strong for your mum," as if my own grief didn't matter. The twins were too young to understand at just 3 years old. Aaron at 7 grew quiet and clingy. I started helping more instinctively, sensing the shifting dynamics in our house. I would sit with the twins while Mum took Dad to appointments. I learnt to make simple meals when Mum was too exhausted to cook. Dad died on a Tuesday morning in October. I was at school when it happened. The school counsellor came to get me, and I knew before she said anything. Mum was sitting in the principal's office, her makeup streaked down her face. "Your father is gone," was all she said, before collapsing into silent sobs. The funeral passed in a daze. Relatives filled our house with casseroles and sympathy. I remember standing beside my mother as people filed past murmuring condolences. She gripped my hand so tightly it hurt, as if I was her only anchor to the earth. For weeks afterward, Mum barely functioned. She moved through the house like a ghost, sometimes not getting out of bed until afternoon. I started waking up early to make sure Aaron and the twins had breakfast. I figured out how to operate the washing machine when we ran out of clean clothes. It felt natural to step up to fill the growing void. After all, everyone kept telling me I needed to help Mum through this difficult time. Financially, we would be okay for a while. Dad had life insurance through his teaching job, and Mum would receive his pension. The mortgage was paid off thanks to my grandparents' help years earlier. But the emotional bankruptcy in our home was palpable. Mum cried at random moments. The twins asked daily when Daddy was coming back. Aaron started having nightmares. I turned 10 that December, celebrating with a small cake Mum managed to buy from the grocery store. As I blew out the candles, I wished for only one thing, for our family to feel whole again. Little did I know that wish would never come true, and that my childhood had effectively ended the same day we buried my father. 6 months after Dad died, something shifted in Mum. It happened gradually, like ice melting this transformation from grieving widow to someone seeking escape. Her tears became less frequent. She started wearing makeup again. She spent more time on phone calls behind closed doors. The first time she went out at night was a Friday. I was 10 and a half. "Sophie, I need you to watch your brother and the twins for a few hours," she said, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Some of the nurses from work are having a girls' night. I need adult time, to help me cope." I nodded solemnly, feeling important to be trusted with this responsibility. "When will you be home?" "Before midnight." There are chicken nuggets in the freezer for dinner. Make sure the twins are in bed by 8, Aaron by 9. She came home at 2 in the morning. I know because I stayed awake, worried something had happened to her. When she stumbled through the door, she smelled like perfume and alcohol. She seemed surprised to see me sitting on the couch. You should be in bed, Sophie, she slurred, kicking off her heels. You said you'd be home by midnight. I was scared, she waved dismissively. I'm a grown woman. I deserve to have some fun after everything I've been through. That became the refrain of my adolescence. Mum deserved to have fun after what she'd been through. Never mind what the rest of us had been through losing Dad too. The outings became more frequent. Once a week, then twice. Soon she was going out most weekends. Each time it was the same, just this once, Sophie, or I really need this, Sophie, followed by her coming home much later than promised, sometimes not until morning. About 8 months after Dad died, Mum introduced us to Gary, her friend, who she'd met at a grief support group. Gary had thinning hair and a booming laugh that made me flinch. He brought us presents that never quite hit the mark, like toy trucks for the 4-year-old twins who were interested in ballet and butterflies. With Gary in the picture, Mum went out even more. Sometimes they took weekend trips, leaving me with a hastily scribbled list of emergency contacts and barely enough food in the fridge. By the time I turned 11, I could cook pasta, make sandwiches, and change sheets wet from the twins' occasional accidents. I remember one Monday morning distinctly. Mum had been out with Gary all weekend and came home just as we needed to leave for school. I had already dressed, everyone made breakfast, packed lunches, and was herding my siblings toward the door. Oh, you're already great, Mum said, dropping her overnight bag in the hallway. She looked exhausted, but somehow still energized. Happy in a way I hadn't seen since before Dad died. We have to go, or we'll be late, I said, trying to zip up Laura's coat while Aaron complained about his math homework that I'd helped him with the night before. You're such a good big sister, Mum said, ruffling my hair as if I were a particularly clever pet. I don't know what I'd do without you. I beamed at the praise, not yet understanding the weight of those words, how they foreshadowed a role I never should have had to play. That same week, I missed my first school event, a science fair, where my project on plant growth had earned a ribbon. I couldn't go to the evening showcase because Mum had a date with Gary, and there was nobody to watch my siblings. When I told my teacher why I couldn't attend, she frowned but said nothing. By this point, my friends had stopped inviting me to birthday parties or after-school activities. They knew I would say no. My world was shrinking to the walls of our house, to the responsibilities that grew with each passing month. The worst part was seeing the confusion on my siblings' faces. The twins, not yet 5, cried for Mum at bedtime. Aaron started acting out, throwing tantrums that I struggled to handle. They all looked to me for the comfort and stability Mum no longer provided, but I was just a child myself, fumbling in the dark. Gary lasted about 6 months before Mum came home in tears, saying he'd found someone else. Her grief period was short this time. Within weeks, she was going out again, meeting new friends, downloading dating apps that she'd scroll through while I cooked dinner. Look at this one, Sophie, she'd say, showing me the profile of some strange man as if we were girlfriends sharing secrets. He owns his own business, and this one has a boat. I would nod and stir the macaroni and cheese, wondering if Dad could see us from heaven and what he would think of what our family had become. By my 11th birthday, the pattern was set. I wasn't just helping out anymore, I was parenting, and Mum was simply visiting our lives between her adventures. My 12th birthday passed with little fanfare. Mum bought a cake and gave me a gift card to a clothing store, but she left before dinner for a date, leaving me to celebrate with my siblings. By this point, my daily routine was so established, it felt almost normal, though there was nothing normal about it. Every morning, I woke up at 5:30 to make lunches for everyone. I had learned that preparing things the night before saved time, so I would set out clothes for the twins and check homework after everyone went to bed. Still, mornings were chaos. Lisa, please put your shoes on. Aaron, did you finish your math homework? Laura, we don't have time for you to change again. I would recite these lines like a mantra while making sure everyone had what they needed for the day. Mum was rarely present for this morning rush. She'd either be sleeping after a late night out, or she'd leave early for work, kissing us goodbye as she rushed out the door, always in a hurry to be somewhere else. After school was my second shift. I'd walk the twins home from their elementary school bus stop, then start on dinner while supervising homework. Aaron, now in middle school, grew increasingly difficult. His teachers called about incomplete assignments and disruptive behaviour. I was listed as his emergency contact, so the calls came to me. Mrs. Wilson says you've been skipping assignments. I confronted him one evening as I stirred spaghetti sauce. He shrugged that sullen preteen gesture that made my blood boil. What's the point? Nobody cares anyway. I care, I said. You're not my parent. He shot back, then immediately looked guilty. I mean, you're my sister. It's different. But it wasn't different, not really. I checked permission slips, attended parent-teacher conferences when Mum couldn't, or more accurately, wouldn't make it. I bandaged skinned knees and soothed hurt feelings. I remembered which twin was allergic to strawberries and which one was scared of thunderstorms. My own schoolwork suffered. I was naturally bright, but it's hard to focus on algebra when you're worried about whether there's enough milk for breakfast the next day. My grades, once straight A's, slipped to B's and occasional C's. My 7th grade English teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, kept me after class one day. Sophie, your last few assignments have been below your usual standard, and you look exhausted. Is everything okay at home? I had prepared for questions like this. Everything's fine. My mom's just been working extra shifts since my dad died, so I help out a lot with my siblings. The sympathy that flooded her face told me she'd bought the excuse. Mum wasn't working extra shifts. She was putting in the minimum hours necessary to keep her job while maximising her social life. But it was easier to perpetuate this fiction of a hard-working widow than to admit the truth. My 13th birthday came and went with Mum, forgetting until 3 days later. The twins turned 7, and I organised their party baking cupcakes and planning games, while Mum made a brief appearance to take photos she later posted online, with captions about being a proud mum. The financial situation grew increasingly strained. Although we had Dad's insurance money and pension, Mum's spending habits were catching up with us. She bought new clothes, got her hair done regularly, and spent money on experiences with whatever man currently occupied her attention. Meanwhile, I learnt to budget, to stretch groceries, to tell my siblings we were having breakfast for dinner, because eggs were cheaper than meat. I started babysitting for neighbours when Mum was actually home to watch my siblings saving every dollar. This money became our emergency fund for when Mum forgot to buy groceries, or when Aaron needed new shoes because he'd outgrown his old ones practically overnight. The worst part was when the twins started occasionally calling me Mom by mistake. The first time it happened, Laura was half asleep fighting a cold. "Thanks, Mom," she murmured as I gave her some children's cold medicine. "I'm not Mom, I'm Sophie," I corrected gently. She blinked up at me confused. "But you do all the mom things." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When I was 14, Mum started dating Mark, a real estate agent, with an expensive car and no interest in children. He would come to the house and barely acknowledge us speaking to my siblings and me, as if we were household fixtures rather than people. One evening, I overheard Mum on the phone with Mark. "It's not that bad," she was saying. "Sophie handles most things with the kids. I hardly have to parent anymore. She's like a built-in babysitter." The casual way she dismissed her responsibilities, the way she took credit for my sacrifice, lit a fire of resentment I couldn't extinguish. Yet I said nothing, did nothing, just added this to the growing pile of hurts I buried deep. By 15, I was completely running the household. Mum would sometimes go days without having a real conversation with any of us. She'd leave money occasionally, or bring home takeout when she was in a good mood, acting like this minimal effort deserved elaborate praise. My friends had stopped trying to include me in their activities. I couldn't go to football games or school dances. I couldn't join clubs or sports teams. My life revolved entirely around my siblings' needs and schedules. The rare moments of freedom I had were spent catching up on homework, or more often catching up on sleep. This wasn't childhood. It was servitude dressed up as family responsibility, and I was starting to understand just how wrong it all was. By 16, exhaustion had become my constant companion. I functioned on autopilot, moving through my days in a fog of responsibilities and suppressed anger. My junior year of high school should have been filled with thoughts of college applications and prom dates. Instead, I worried about whether I could ever leave home without abandoning my siblings. The breaking point came during finals week of my junior year. Both twins caught a stomach virus that ripped through their elementary school. For 2 days straight, I barely slept, alternating between studying for exams and cleaning up after sick children. Mum was theoretically home, but she locked herself in her bedroom, claiming she couldn't afford to get sick because of work. By the third morning, having been up all night, I stood in the kitchen staring blankly at the empty refrigerator. We needed groceries. The twins needed more Pedialyte. Aaron needed his gym uniform washed for school, and I had a physics final in 4 hours that I hadn't been able to study for. Something inside me snapped. I stormed to Mum's bedroom and pounded on the door until she opened it, bleary-eyed and irritated. "What is your problem, Sophie?" My problem is that I haven't slept in 48 hours because your children have been violently ill while you hide in here. My problem is that I have finals I haven't studied for. My problem is that I'm 16 years old and I'm raising your kids." She had the audacity to look offended. "You're being dramatic. I'm right here." "Being in the house isn't the same as being a parent," I shot back. "When was the last time you cooked a meal, helped with homework, took the twins to a doctor's appointment? Do you even know that Aaron got detention last week? Don't take that tone with me. I work hard to keep a roof over your heads. Dad's insurance and pension keep a roof over our heads. You work part-time and spend the rest going out with whatever loser you're dating this month." The slap caught me by surprise, the sting blooming across my cheek as tears sprang to my eyes. Mum had never hit me before. We stood frozen, both shocked at the line that had been crossed. "Sophie, she began, but I was already turning away, grabbing my backpack. "I have to get to school. The twins still have fevers. There's no food in the house. But by all means, go back to bed." I somehow made it through my physics final that day, though I couldn't tell you a single question that was on it. When I got home, Mum had ordered pizza and bought groceries, a peace offering of sorts. She never apologized for the slap. I never apologized for the harsh words. We simply moved on the incident, buried under the mountain of unspoken resentments. The situation worsened when Mum started bringing home men who made me uncomfortable. Not all of them, but enough. Like the friend of her boyfriend who stared at me too long when I was in my pajamas, making comments about how I was turning into such a beautiful young woman. I started wearing oversized hoodies around the house, making sure the twins were never alone with any of Mum's visitors. During career week at school, the guidance counselor, Mr. Jenkins, called me in to discuss college plans. He pushed brochures toward me for state universities and scholarship applications, his face alight with enthusiasm. "Your GPA is excellent despite the dip last year, and your test scores are top tier. You could get significant scholarships, Sophie." I nodded, not telling him that college had begun to feel like a fantasy as impossible as sprouting wings. "Who would take care of my siblings if I left? Is something wrong?" he asked, noticing my lack of enthusiasm. "I'm not sure I can go away to college," I admitted. "My mum relies on me to help with my younger siblings." His brow furrowed. "Your education should be the priority. There are ways to make it work, local options if needed." I nodded again, not believing him, but not wanting to explain. How could I tell this well-meaning man that my mother had essentially abandoned her parental responsibilities, that I was more parent than sister to 3 children, that college applications felt like a betrayal of the siblings who relied on me? Nevertheless, I did apply to colleges, including the state university, just 30 minutes from our house. When the acceptance letters came along with substantial scholarship offers, I hid them in my desk drawer, uncertain of my path forward. The final breaking point came when Mom announced she was going on a 2-week cruise with her latest boyfriend, Derek. "You'll be fine with the kids, she said, not even phrasing it as a question. "It's my first real vacation in years. 2 weeks I have AP exams coming up. And who's going to drive Aaron to his orthodontist appointment or take the twins to their dance recital?" She waved dismissively. "You can handle it. You always do. The kids listen to you better than me anyway." The casual way she abdicated responsibility, the complete lack of recognition for what she was asking, ignited my fury. "No," I said, the word unfamiliar in my mouth. "Excuse me." I said no, I'm not doing it. I'm 17 years old. I'm not staying alone with 3 children for 2 weeks while you go on a cruise with a man you've known for 3 months. Her face darkened. "After everything I've done for this family, I deserve some happiness. You're just jealous that I have a life, and you don't." The accusation was so ludicrous I actually laughed. "I don't have a life because I've been raising your children. I'm not jealous, Mom. I'm exhausted, and I'm done. I did something I'd never done before." I called my maternal grandmother and told her everything. Not the sanitized version we presented to the outside world, but the ugly truth of our daily reality. How Mum used me as a replacement parent. How she prioritized her social life over her children's well-being. How I'd sacrificed my entire childhood to keep our family functioning. Grandma showed up the next day, her face tight with anger. She and Mum had a screaming match behind closed doors, while I sat with my siblings in the backyard, trying to shield them from the conflict. Mum was furious that I'd reported her to Grandma as if I'd broken some code of silence. But for the first time, someone else was witnessing the reality of our situation. An adult was finally stepping in to say, "This isn't right." Grandma couldn't fix everything, but her intervention forced a reckoning. Mum cancelled the cruise. Grandma started coming over regularly, providing the adult supervision that allowed me small tastes of normal teenage life. And I made the decision to accept my scholarship to State University, committing to a future beyond the walls of our dysfunctional home. The summer after high school graduation blurred into a haze of preparation, both practical and emotional. I had chosen State University partly because of its proximity, allowing me to come home on weekends if needed. I'd received a scholarship that covered tuition and a stipend for books, but I'd still need to work to cover additional expenses. Telling my siblings about my decision was one of the hardest conversations of my life. We sat in the backyard under the oak tree that had been our refuge for years. I got accepted to college, I said, trying to sound excited rather than guilty. I'll be living on campus during the week, but I'll come home most weekends. Aaron, now 15, nodded stoically, though I could see the tension in his jaw. The twins at 11 were less restrained in their reactions. You can't leave, Laura said, her voice rising in panic. Who's going to help us with homework? Who's going to make dinner? Mum will be here, I said, not believing it myself. Lisa scoffed. Mum's never here, not really. Grandma will check in on you guys, I promised. And I'll call every day. It's only 30 minutes away if you need me. Their faces reflected varying degrees of abandonment and resignation. They'd come to rely on me so completely that my departure felt like a second loss of a parent. The guilt was overwhelming, but for the first time in 8 years, I was choosing myself. Mum's reaction was a mixture of resentment and relief. Resentment that I was disrupting the convenient system where she enjoyed freedom while I handled her responsibilities. Relief that I wouldn't be there to witness and judge her behavior. I suppose this means I'll have to cut back on my social life, she said, making it sound like an enormous sacrifice. You're their mother. That's your job, I replied, past caring if my bluntness hurt her feelings. Move-in day arrived with unexpected emotions. As I packed my few belongings into second-hand suitcases, there was the predictable sadness of leaving my siblings, but also a startling sense of liberation. I would have a room with just my things, a schedule determined by my needs and choices. Meals I didn't have to prepare for others. Campus life was overwhelming at first. After years of hyper-responsibility, the sudden freedom left me unmoored. I kept waking up at 5:30 out of habit, panicking briefly that I'd forgotten to make lunches before remembering where I was. My roommate Jasmine noticed my odd behaviours. The way I automatically tidied her things, how I stockpiled snacks in our mini fridge, my constant checking of my phone for texts from home. You act like my mum, she joked one evening, not realising how close to the truth she was. I called home every night that first week, getting updates from each sibling. Mum rarely answered, but Grandma checked in every few days, assuring me things were under control. I didn't fully believe her, but I tried to focus on my classes on this new chapter I'd worked so hard to reach. The calls from home started the second week. Aaron got in trouble for skipping school. The twins needed help with a science project. Mum forgot they had early dismissal and wasn't home when they got off the bus. Each call pulled me back into the role I was trying to escape. My first weekend home, I found the house in disarray. Dishes piled in the sink, laundry overflowing the hampers, the refrigerator nearly empty. I spent Saturday cleaning and grocery shopping instead of catching up with high school friends as I'd planned. Sunday was meal prep and helping with homework. By the time I returned to campus Sunday night, I felt like I hadn't left at all. This pattern continued for months. Weekdays were for classes, study groups, and my part-time job at the campus bookstore. Weekends were for damage control at home. Mum made token efforts when I first left, but quickly reverted to her old habits, going out most nights, leaving the kids to fend for themselves until I arrived on Friday evenings. I started working additional shifts, saving every extra dollar. This money didn't go toward the college experiences my classmates enjoyed, the parties or spring break trips. Instead, it went into a separate account I used to buy groceries, school supplies, and clothes for my siblings when Mum's provision fell short. By second semester, the strain showed in my grades and health. I was perpetually exhausted, caught between two worlds, excelling in neither. My professor for Psychology 101 kept me after class one day. Your midterm showed a strong understanding of developmental psychology, she said, particularly the effects of parentification on children. It felt very personally informed. I hadn't realised how much of my own experience had seeped into my essay. I help with my younger siblings a lot. I said my standard evasion. She nodded thoughtfully. The university offers free counselling services to students. Many find it helpful for managing stress and family obligations. It was the gentlest of suggestions, but it planted a seed. Maybe I needed to talk to someone about what I'd experienced, what I was still experiencing. Maybe what happened to me even had a name, parentification. Junior year brought an unexpected change when I met James in my American literature class. He was thoughtful and perceptive, noticing how I flinched when classmates complained about their controlling parents or how I hoarded extra napkins from the dining hall. Small behaviors I hadn't realized revealed so much about my upbringing. We started dating cautiously. I had little experience with relationships, having never had time for them in high school. More significantly, I had trouble trusting that anyone would stick around once they saw the complicated reality of my life. But James surprised me. When I finally told him about my family situation, he didn't run. Instead, he listened with growing concern, occasionally asking questions that highlighted just how abnormal my childhood had been. "So from age 10, you were essentially the primary caregiver for 3 children, he asked. I never thought about it that way, but yes. Sophie, that's parentification. It's a form of child abuse. His words hit me like a physical blow. Abuse, I had never considered it that way. Unfair, yes. Exhausting, absolutely. But abuse suggested a level of harm I wasn't ready to acknowledge. At James's gentle encouragement, I finally visited the University Counselling Centre. The therapist, Dr. Chen, helped me understand that what I had experienced wasn't just a difficult childhood, but a profound role reversal that had stolen my developmental years. Children who are parentified often struggle with setting boundaries, she explained. They develop an excessive sense of responsibility while suppressing their own needs. Does that sound familiar? It described me perfectly. I couldn't say no to anyone who needed help. I apologized constantly. I felt guilty whenever I did something purely for my own enjoyment. Therapy became my lifeline as I began the slow process of untangling my identity from my caretaking role. It also helped me make the difficult decision not to move back home after graduation, despite the crushing guilt this caused. Instead, I found an apartment near campus with James, who was staying for graduate school. I secured a job as an administrative assistant at the university, providing stable income, while I figured out my longer-term career goals. And I committed to being present for my siblings without sacrificing my entire life to rescue them. My 20s unfolded in a delicate balance between building my own life and supporting my siblings from a safer distance. Aaron graduated high school with decent grades, not spectacular, but enough to get him into community college. I spent hours helping him complete financial aid applications, something Mum showed no interest in understanding. The twins thrived academically, despite the chaos at home, perhaps because they had each other for support. By the time they entered high school, they had developed resilience and independence born of necessity. I attended their 14th birthday party, watching Mum float through the gathering of teenage girls playing the role of devoted mother for an audience of their friends' parents. She barely stayed an hour before leaving for a date. "She does this every time," Lisa whispered to me as Mum air-kissed her goodbye. "Shows up, takes pictures for Facebook, then disappears." "I'm sorry," I said, the inadequate words sticking in my throat. Laura shrugged. "We're used to it. At least we have you." My relationship with Mom grew increasingly strained as I established my independence. She seemed genuinely puzzled by my coldness, as if she couldn't understand why I might harbor resentment. In her revisionist history, she was a struggling single mother who had done her best, and I was an ungrateful daughter who didn't appreciate her sacrifices. "I gave you everything I could," she said during one particularly tense phone call. "I kept a roof over your heads." "The bare minimum isn't everything, Mom," I replied. "You were physically present sometimes, but you checked out emotionally when Dad died. You chose your social life over your children for years. That's not fair. I deserved some happiness after your father died. Do you know how hard it was for me?" This was her constant refrain. Her pain, her loss, her needs. Never acknowledging that we had all lost Dad, that we had all suffered, that her children deserved a mother who showed up for more than photo opportunities. As I continued therapy and built a healthier life with James, I became increasingly aware of how my upbringing had shaped my adult choices. The thought of having children terrified me. What if I couldn't do better than Mom? What if the cycle continued? "You're not your mother," Dr. Chen reminded me during a session focused on this fear. "The fact that you're even concerned about this shows you're already breaking the pattern." James and I married when I was 26. Mum attended the wedding with her boyfriend du jour, a silver-haired financial advisor named Richard, who looked uncomfortable, surrounded by family. During the reception, Mum managed to make multiple conversations about herself, telling distant relatives how she had sacrificed everything for her children after being widowed so young. I bit my tongue, unwilling to create drama on my wedding day. But the twins, now 16 and increasingly outspoken, weren't as restrained. "Is that why Sophie raised us, while you were out with boyfriends?" Lisa asked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. The mortified look on Mum's face gave me a petty satisfaction I immediately felt guilty about. Mum left the reception early, claiming a headache. I was relieved. As Aaron and the twins moved into adulthood, our relationships evolved in complex ways. They appreciated what I had done for them, yet also harbored some resentment that I hadn't been able to fully protect them from Mum's neglect. Aaron particularly struggled with commitment in relationships, fearing abandonment and distrusting women's motives. "I'm working on it in therapy," he told me over coffee one Sunday. "But it's hard to trust when your mum treats you like an inconvenience for most of your life." The twins fared somewhat better, having had each other as constant support. They both excelled in college, Lisa studying nursing like Mum, but with a genuine passion for caregiving that Mum had lacked Laura, pursuing education with plans to teach elementary school. "We want to help people," Laura explained. "I think watching you sacrifice so much for us made us want to give back somehow." Their words filled me with conflicting emotions: pride in the adults they'd become, sorrow for the childhood circumstances that had shaped them, anger at Mom for creating the situation in the first place. My own therapy continued, helping me process the lingering effects of parentification, the anxiety, the hypervigilance, the difficulty accepting care from others. James was endlessly patient, gently challenging my instinct to take responsibility for everyone around me. As I approached 30, Mum began to change tactics. No longer defensive about her parenting, she instead took credit for how well we had all turned out. "I raised such responsible children," she would say to friends or on social media, posting throwback photos that created a fictional narrative of hands-on motherhood. "Sophie is so organized because I taught her good habits early." My blood would boil at these revisions of history, but I maintained civil, if distant, contact. For the sake of family holidays and my siblings' peace of mind, I played along with the fiction that we were a normal family with ordinary disagreements, not one fractured by years of neglect and role reversal. Mum aged, but her essential self-centeredness remained constant. When she turned 50, she threw herself an elaborate party, lamenting that none of her children offered to plan it for her. When she faced a health scare mild but concerning, she expected me to drop everything and attend her appointments, manage her medications, research her condition. I set boundaries that she constantly tested and violated. A quick phone call would turn into hours of complaints about her life. A request for advice became demands for time, money, emotional support. She treated me like a spouse rather than a daughter, expecting a level of care and attention I had long since decided not to provide. The final breaking point came when Mum started dating Walter, a divorced father of 2 young children. She called me one evening, her voice artificially bright. "Sophie, I need your advice. Walter's ex is having some issues and his kids might need to stay with us for a while. I thought maybe you could come help out just temporarily. You're so good with children and I'm a little out of practice." The audacity was breathtaking. After stealing my childhood to raise her children, she now wanted me to help raise her boyfriend's kids so she could continue her carefree lifestyle. "No," I said, the word coming easily after years of practice. "I'm not available for that. But it would just be for a few weeks until his ex gets back on her feet. You could stay in your old room." "Mum, I'm not coming to help you raise Walter's children. That's not my responsibility. You're being selfish," she said, her tone shifting instantly from wheedling to accusatory. "After everything I've done for you." Something inside me finally snapped the last thread of restraint I'd maintained for family harmony. "What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Did you help me with homework, attend my school events, make sure I had childhood friends and experiences? No, you outsourced your parenting to a child so you could go on dates. You stole my childhood and now you want me to give up my adulthood too. Not happening." "That's a terrible thing to say. I was a single mother doing my best." "Your best was showing up for photos and then leaving. Your best was making me grow up at 10 years old so you didn't have to be inconvenienced by your own children. Your best wasn't good enough, Mum. And I'm done pretending it was." I hung up, feeling both lighter and heavier. The conversation had been brewing for 20 years, but saying the words out loud felt like releasing a poison I'd carried for too long. A week passed after our phone confrontation. Then another. I didn't call Mum, and she didn't call me. The silence stretched, uncomfortable, yet necessary. James noticed my distraction, but gave me space, understanding this was something I needed to process in my own time. At 32, I had spent over 2 decades managing the emotional fallout of my mother's choices. The parentification that began after Dad died had shaped every aspect of my life: my compulsive need to take care of others, my difficulty accepting help, my delayed exploration of my own interests and desires. Through therapy, I had made significant progress, but the final step remained confronting the source. When Mum finally called, her tone was conciliatory yet defensive. "I think we need to talk in person," she said. "There seems to be some misunderstanding about your childhood." I agreed to meet at a coffee shop neutral territory where neither of us would have the home field advantage. When I arrived, she was already seated, looking older than her years in the harsh afternoon light. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, quickly replaced by resolve. This conversation was long overdue. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began after we ordered. "I think you have some misconceptions about your childhood. I did the best I could as a single mother." "I need you to listen, Mom. Really listen," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "After Dad died, you checked out. Not just for a few months of grief, but for years. I became the parent to Aaron and the twins while you dated and partied. That's not fair. I worked to support us. Part-time. Dad's insurance and pension covered most expenses. And I'm not talking about finances. I'm talking about who got the kids ready for school every morning, who helped with homework, who made sure there was food in the house, who attended parent-teacher conferences. That was me, not you." She shifted uncomfortably. "You're exaggerating. You helped out, yes, but that's what families do." "I wasn't helping out, Mom. I was running the household from age 10. Do you know that the twins used to accidentally call me Mom? Do you know that I missed most of my high school experiences because I was raising your children? Do you even remember that you slapped me when I was 16 because I had the audacity to ask for help after being up for 48 hours with the sick twins?" Her eyes widened at this specific memory. "That never happened." "It did. Just like it happened that you introduced us to a parade of boyfriends, some who made inappropriate comments to me when I was a teenager. Just like it happened that you forgot my 14th birthday entirely. Just like it happened that you told your boyfriend Mark you hardly had to parent anymore because I did everything." Tears filled her eyes, but whether from genuine remorse or self-pity, I couldn't tell. "I don't remember things that way. That's the problem, Mom. You've created this fictional version of our family where you were a dedicated single mother doing her best, but your best involved abandoning your responsibilities to a child. Do you understand what that did to me, to all of us?" The coffee between us grew cold as I methodically detailed the reality of my childhood-specific incidents she had conveniently forgotten. How she left us alone overnight for the first time when I was barely 11. How I learnt to forge her signature on school permission slips because she never bothered to read them. How I started working at 15 to buy groceries when she spent the household money on a weekend trip with her boyfriend. Her reactions cycled through predictable phases: denial, minimization, guilt, and finally anger. So I wasn't perfect. No parent is. You make it sound like I abandoned you, but I was always there. Being physically present sometimes isn't the same as being a parent. You outsourced your responsibilities to me, a child, so you could prioritize your social life and romantic relationships. That's abandonment, even if you came home to sleep most nights. What do you want from me, Sophie? An apology. Fine. I'm sorry you feel I wasn't a good enough mother. Is that what you need to hear? The non-apology was so typical that I almost laughed. What I need is for you to actually see what happened. To acknowledge the reality instead of the convenient fiction you've created. And mostly, I need you to respect my boundaries now as an adult since you never respected my childhood. What boundaries? You barely speak to me as it is. I won't be helping with Walter's children. I won't be your emotional caretaker. I won't let you rewrite history or take credit for the person I became, despite your neglect, not because of your parenting. And until you can acknowledge the truth and show genuine remorse, I won't be maintaining regular contact. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small for the magnitude of this conversation. Mum's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "So you're just cutting me off after everything? That's cruel, Sophie." "It's not cruel, it's necessary, for my health and happiness." I stood gathering my purse. "When you're ready to have an honest conversation about our past, and how we might have a healthier relationship moving forward, I'll be open to that. But I won't keep pretending." I walked out of the coffee shop feeling simultaneously exhausted and liberated. The confrontation had been brewing for decades, words I'd rehearsed in my mind, but never had the courage to speak aloud. Now they hung in the air between us, impossible to take back, impossible to ignore. The fallout was immediate and messy. Mum called my siblings, presenting herself as the victim of my unreasonable cruelty. Some extended family members took her side, unable or unwilling to see beyond the facade she'd maintained for years. But Aaron and the twins understood. They had lived the same reality, even if their experiences differed from mine as the oldest. "We support you," Lisa told me during a three-way call with Laura. "We love Mum, but we know what happened. We were there." Their validation meant everything, confirming I wasn't crazy or overly sensitive. My experiences were real, my feelings justified. The weeks after the confrontation brought unexpected peace. Without the emotional drain of maintaining the fiction of a normal mother-daughter relationship, I had more energy for the people and activities that brought me joy. James noticed the difference immediately. "You seem lighter," he observed one evening as we cooked dinner together. "Less tense." He was right. The constant vigilance, the anticipation of Mum's next boundary violation or historical revision had taken a toll I hadn't fully recognised until it was gone. Therapy continued to be essential as I processed the aftermath of the confrontation and the complex emotions it triggered. Dr. Chen helped me navigate the guilt that occasionally surfaced, the cultural programming that insisted cutting off a parent was unacceptable, regardless of circumstances. "Estrangement isn't the first choice," she reminded me. "It's usually the last resort after numerous attempts to establish a healthy relationship have failed. You've been trying for over 20 years. My relationships with my siblings deepened in the absence of Mum's manipulations. Aaron, now 28, was working through his own trauma in therapy, beginning to form healthier romantic relationships. The twins at 24 were thriving in their careers, both engaged to partners who understood and supported their complex family history. We created new traditions, gathering for holidays at my home, rather than Mum celebrating achievements, without the tension her presence always brought. It wasn't perfect. We all carried scars from our upbringing, but there was genuine love and respect among us. 6 months after our confrontation, Mum sent a text asking to meet again. Part of me wanted to refuse to protect the peace I'd found, but curiosity and a small, persistent hope led me to agree. She looked smaller somehow when I met her at the same coffee shop, as if the weight of reality had physically diminished her. She pushed a small, wrapped package across the table. "I found this when I was cleaning out some old boxes," she said. Inside was a faded photo of me at about 7, sitting on Dad's shoulders at a county fair, both of us laughing at something off camera. I had no memory of this day, this moment of pure childhood joy before everything changed. "I've been thinking about what you said," Mum began hesitantly. "I talked to my therapist about it." The admission that she was seeing a therapist surprised me. It was the first sign that something might have shifted. "At first, I was just going to prove you wrong," she continued, "to have someone validate that I wasn't a terrible mother. But she's been asking me questions that make me uncomfortable, about my choices after your father died, about why I needed so much external validation from men, about why I resented normal parental responsibilities." She paused, struggling visibly with whatever came next. "I still don't remember things exactly the way you described them, but I'm starting to understand that my memories might not be reliable, that I might have rewritten some things to make myself feel better." It wasn't a full acknowledgement, not even close, but it was the first crack in the wall of denial she'd built over decades. We talked for over an hour more honestly than we ever had before. She didn't suddenly transform into a self-aware, remorseful person. There were still deflections, still attempts to minimize, but there were also moments of genuine reflection that gave me cautious hope. "I'd like to try to have a relationship with you," she said as we prepared to leave. "A better one than before. I can't change the past, but maybe we can have a different future." "Maybe," I agreed carefully, "but it would need to be on new terms, with boundaries that you respect, and with honesty about the past, not convenient fictions." She nodded and we parted with a tentative plan to speak again in a few weeks. I didn't know if anything would really change, if she was capable of the deep self-reflection needed to build a healthier relationship. But for the first time, I felt I was engaging with her from a position of strength rather than obligation. My journey of healing continued, expanding beyond my relationship with Mum to touch every aspect of my life. James and I began discussing having children, my fear gradually giving way to cautious excitement about breaking the cycle, about creating the loving, stable home I had craved as a child. I maintained firm boundaries with Mum, which she sometimes respected and sometimes tested. Our relationship remained complicated, occasionally rewarding, often frustrating. but I no longer carried the burden of her emotional well-being or the weight of family fictions. The twins graduated with their master's degrees, and all 4 siblings gathered to celebrate. As I watched them laughing together, successful adults, despite the challenges of our childhood, I felt a profound gratitude, not for Mum's neglect, which had caused genuine harm, but for our resilience, for the bonds we had formed in the vacuum of parental care. Parents may forget the impacts of their choices, conveniently rewriting history to ease their guilt. But children remember everything: the absences, the broken promises, the moments of abandonment. We carry these memories not just as wounds, but eventually as wisdom, hard-earned insights that can, with work and intention, guide us toward breaking cycles rather than repeating them. If you've experienced parentification or any form of childhood trauma, know that healing is possible. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Your story matters, and sharing it can help others feel less alone. Please leave a comment about your experience, subscribe. If my story resonated with you, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that their childhood experiences were valid, even if the adults in their lives refuse to acknowledge the truth. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, it's never too late to reclaim the life you deserve.